right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Social Z Franchise Happy Hour. I'm your host, Calvin Smith. As usual, I'm up here in beautiful Destin, Florida. We're finally getting some sunny weather this week. I got a little past the cold spell, and I've got an awesome entrepreneur and consultant, Chris Wilson, joining us from a little further south down in Orlando. Chris, how are you?
I'm pretty good, Calvin. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Chris, what we do to kick this off every episode is we ask you to give a, 60 to 120-second introduction about yourself and whatever you feel is important to kind of lay the framework for the rest of our conversation. So whenever you're ready.
Sure, 60 seconds. I don't know if I'll need that long, but we'll see. My name is Chris Wilson. I run Legacy Franchise Ventures, which is a full-service franchise consulting firm. So we help people in a number of ways, but the two main ways are, number one, turning an existing business into a franchise. And then secondly, for folks who are looking to invest in a franchise, we help find them a franchise that matches their needs, walk them through that whole process, make sure they're asking the right questions and engaging the right resources when they need them. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Awesome, awesome. And Chris, we definitely want to dive into your business and learn more about that and how you can help, existing franchisees or potential franchisees. A big part of what we like to talk about on here is how we got into franchising. And so, you are not only a franchise consultant, but you've, bought, sold, owned your own franchises as well. Do you care to share a little bit about the path of how you, became an entrepreneur and what your journey was to get to kind of where you are today?
Sure. So I guess my introduction to franchising was I was 14 years old. My first job at Carvel Ice Cream Bakery. For those in the Northeast, probably remember Carvel pretty well. But that was my first job, and I knew it was a franchise. I knew what franchising was, generally speaking. And the owner of that particular location was a pretty young guy. He was about 30 years old, and I thought that was interesting. So while most people were trying to figure out how to make an ice cream cone, I was trying to figure out how he got a franchise at 30. And it turns out that his father was a very rich man, and his father would gift all of his children a business when they turned 30. And it was up to them to run the business. If they ran it and turned it into something great, then awesome. But if they didn't do well, he was kind of like, hey, listen, I gave you your shot. You're off my payroll. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The only problem was my father, although he did well, was not a very rich man. And so I wasn't gifted a franchise at 30. So I had to figure some other stuff out. So I went to school. My background was in technology. I got laid off. And that's when I started thinking, being laid off is not cool. I wanted to have an additional stream of income so that if I got laid off again, I, wouldn't have to rely on that one salary only. So started researching franchises, with the little that I knew about it, and invested in my first franchise a couple of years ago. Did really well. As luck would have it, I got laid off 2 more times after that investment. And so the third and final time, the business was up and running, and I was making a decent amount of money that I could support, my family, without having to work corporate, and then just took it from there. Once I got a little crack in the door, I kicked the door open and then went in full sail. So
Sure, sure. And Chris, when you bought your franchises, talk about that a little bit. Did you use a consultant and someone like yourself now to help you guide you through that journey? And what were the franchises that you ultimately purchased, and what was the reasons behind that?
yeah, so I had no clue. Luckily, I had a friend of mine who was a little bit older. And I just knew that he was spending a lot of time on the golf course. And I was like, man, he has a pretty cool life. So I asked him what he did. And it turns out he was a franchise developer. So he was a master developer. He knew a little bit about franchising because he had, ran multiple units. And so I sat down with him, and he was actually transitioning from being a developer to being a franchise consultant. And so we sat down, had a consultation, and he asked some questions that most good franchise consultants will ask. What you're looking for, what your investment level is. Do you want something full time or part time? And he essentially came up with a list of some brands that I thought would fit based on our consultation. Ultimately, I ended up investing in a Club Pilates down here in Orlando, which was an awesome experience, great brand. Part of the deciding factors for me was I wanted something that I could keep my corporate job at the time before I got laid off. I wanted something where I could work my corporate job, but still kind of do this on the side. And that kind of limited the number of franchises we had to choose from at that time. Bunch of what we call semi-absentee options out there, but it was important to check that box. And so, went through the process with him of figuring out, was this the brand the right fit for me? Ultimately reviewed the documentation, went to Discovery Day, and then came back and decided that it was something that I wanted to invest in.
Awesome. Awesome. And so, you bought your first one. Was it 2017, 2018? When did you buy the first one?
2016.
2016. Okay. Awesome. And then after that, Chris, did you end up buying another one? Did I understand that correctly? So you end up with multiple locations, or?
Yes, I ended up did really well on the first one and decided that, hey, this is pretty cool, and wasn't working corporate anymore. So kind of took some of the proceeds from the first one and rolled that into the second one. So we had 2 units. The second one opened like right in the middle of COVID, which was obviously a little interesting. But got both of those up and running and did well at both locations.
Sure. And so your journey to start your franchise, you found someone, that kind of helped you, guide you through that process, and you could kind of pick their brain, learn what to ask, what to look for, which is obviously very helpful. You started with one location, did well, ended up buying another location. And did I understand that you also recently were able to have an exit and sell those franchises?
Yeah, so I was having a bunch of fun running them. Ultimately, COVID took a little wind out of my sail just from, just dealing with that whole thing. But even building the business back after COVID, just got presented with an opportunity to exit, and the numbers just made sense, and it kind of opened me up from a time perspective and a capital perspective to kind of do some projects that I wanted to do next. So decided to take the exit on that.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Chris. A lot of the people that we talk to on here, their end goal is to at some point be able to sell it, and a lot of people don't know the path to get there, or, what that'll look like. And a lot of them, they think it's 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And it's kind of a dream of theirs. So it's awesome you were able to go through in 5 years, you were able to go through not only purchasing your first franchise, buying a second unit, and then having an exit. Well, so that's a pretty quick learning journey to go through in 5, 6 year period, man. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we probably don't talk enough about, right? We talk about the beginning and finding the right brand, but I think it's also equally important to kind of think about what those exit strategy options are. And it's important to just do it because, number one, you could think you want to run the business for a year or 2 years and then end up loving it and want to do it longer, or vice versa. But it's just important to know, that you have some options there. I know most standard franchise agreements are 10 years, and that scares some people. But I always explain, 10 years is kind of like just that number. You could always move that number up or down with these different exit strategies, and so I was able to do that.
Chris, this is probably a good segue into us to dive into your current business and what you do, and how you're able to help people like were in your position 5 or 6 years ago, looking to jump into franchising. Before we do that, as a little halfway point, what I'd like to do is kind of segue here and ask you about the paintings and the pictures behind you. So we don't get to go into people's offices anymore, not very often anyway, so we don't get to see all their interesting pictures. So tell me a little bit. You've got some cool pieces back there. I don't know if you want to talk about all of them or just a few of them, but what are we looking at back there?
Yeah, so loved art, and this kind of happened during COVID. Before, my desk was kind of turned around the other way, and it was just horrible with the lighting because the window was behind me. And so when Zoom and all of these other video conference tools became like a thing, I decided I had to make behind me look a little bit more appealing. And so I had a couple of pieces already. The main piece was a high school friend of mine. She drew that for me. I thought it was pretty cool. And then just some posters and paintings that I've acquired either, locally or while traveling. And so it's funny, I forget that it's there until someone mentions it, but then I turn around, I'm like, oh yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. Generally when we do meetings and things, we'd see pictures in people's offices and things like that, but now it's,
That's right.
whatever they have behind them. So it's cool to see them. And yeah, you've got some neat ones back there as well. So, Well, let's jump into your current business and what talk a little bit about what you're doing, what makes you different than maybe some other franchise consultants, and who's your target client. Where does someone need to be at in this journey to start engaging with you and really you know um, kind of start this process with your business.
Yeah, so my target client is literally anyone who just wants to learn about franchises. I offer free consultations, so wherever folks are in that journey, whether they're a couple years off or ready to do something today, I'm perfectly happy to have that conversation with them. A lot of times, the person is kind of like my journey, either got laid off once or twice. Maybe their position was affected by COVID, during the pandemic. Or sometimes people hit a ceiling at their corporate career and, are making a lot of money for someone else and kind of want to invest some of that into themselves and just feel some of what that entrepreneurship spirit gets you. I mean, you still have to work hard, but it's different working for yourself, as I'm sure most entrepreneurs will agree. What I really like to focus on is knowing, I think what's interesting is because I have run these businesses and franchising myself, I have a unique perspective as far as what a business really is. So I really drill down on the business model. And, I don't worry too much about the product or service. Initially, we really need to be in lockstep with the business model and make sure that, the day-to-day operations of running that business are going to check some boxes. So what do I mean by that? Like if, you have if the client has a child that they like to pick up from school every day at 3 o'clock, there are certain businesses that will allow you to do that, right? So let's figure out what's important to you. I ask my clients to come up with a list of non-negotiables. So if you don't want to work weekends, you don't want to work nights, you want to be able to pick up your kid at 3 o'clock, let's put all of that on paper, and then compare that to the available franchises out there. Now, I can't promise you that there's going to be one that checks all of those boxes, but we can certainly try to find it. And, maybe we find someone that checks, 9 out of 10 boxes and the 10th one wasn't even that big of a deal, right? So that would be ideal. Yeah.
And Chris, what does that typical process look like? So if I'm, at working a corporate job, I'm thinking about, hey, I want to either venture out on my own, or like you did, I'd like to have, an asset that's building some equity for me while I'm keeping my corporate job. What's the steps that we'll go through with working with you, and dive into those a little bit, and then how long does that process take generally from the time I call you and say, hey, Chris, here's what, I'm thinking, to the time where, we're actually getting ready to sign some papers.
Yeah. So by law, the fastest you can actually do it is 21 days, just about. So I don't know that I would suggest that for any of my clients. There's certainly a little bit more due diligence that we need to do, but on paper, that's the fastest you can do it. Typically, it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 months on average, and sometimes, quite honestly, it takes people 9, 10 months, a year and change, right? So no rush from this perspective. It has to be right brand and right time for you. We're still running life and things happen, right? So totally cognizant of that. The process, though, is the first step is a consultation where I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. I'm going to try to determine your why, because the why is really important. Data shows that people who have a compelling reason to go into business ownership do better, right? So we want to make sure that there's a compelling reason. I got laid off, or I, need to make significantly more money than I'm making currently, or need it to fit in my time. Whatever that why is, we want to figure that out. Come up with that list through that consultation, and then that's when I kind of go in my back cave and kind of peel back on some brands that may be a good fit. And what I like about that part of the process is a lot of times clients come and they think they know what they want, and then I suggest something totally different that they never thought of, because I'm focusing on the data of what they said they were looking for, not so much the product or service, right? So, and that's what happened with me. Like, honestly, I never had a clue that I would run a Pilates studio. I didn't even know what Pilates was a couple of years ago. But the business model really made sense for what I was looking for, and that's what I try to find for my clients.
Sure, sure. Yeah, people are often surprised, I found, Chris, of how many different, services, industries, whatever it is that you can do franchising in.
Yeah.
I mean, there's any business you could possibly think of. For the most part, there's going to be a franchise option, and you're right. A lot of people come into it, thinking, hey, I want to do, industry A, and when really, based on the research you're going to do with them, and as you said, peeling back that onion on what they want personally, there's other options that will probably fit them that they've never heard about or never do the research for on their own.
Correct.
So one of the benefits of working with you, right, is there's, you're exposed to so many more options and so many, other industries and things like that people are not going to find with just a basic Google search, right?
So I was, there are 4,000 different franchises out there, right? And obviously we have Google at our fingertips. You can end up in a very dark place on the internet trying to find like all of these brands. And then you really don't know who the good brands are from the bad brands, who's going to actually make you some money, who's going to support you the right way. Whereas I am like doing this every day, all day, traveling to different franchise companies' headquarters, going to franchise shows, finding out about it, doing research, talking to people who are running the organizations. And so I just have a little bit more data than, your average searcher would. Don't pretend to know it all by any stretch of the imagination, because every day literally is a learning process. But what I'm able to do for my clients, and I think the value add here, is remove some of the legwork with some of that research, and develop and bring them a short list of the things that they say that they're looking for, right? And then it's much easier to research, 5 brands as opposed to 4,000, right? And so you can focus on that short list, and then see if something makes sense. We can expand the list as necessary or drill down on a specific area. But most of my clients say that I saved them a lot of time, and they wonder how I did it. But it's really not that hard. I just kind of listen to what they say they're looking for and then go find it.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, one of the things that I have a conversation about a lot of times when I tell people that I'm in franchising is, how much does it cost? How did I get the money? I can't afford to do that. Where are you at, and where is the conversation around the financial piece with you and your clients? I mean, do they need to already have the money secured? Do they need to, not have any money? Like, what do you look for in a client from a financial perspective, whenever you start engaging with them?
To me, the biggest thing is that you have a curiosity and are willing to find out. A lot of times we talk ourselves out of opportunities. I can't afford that. I don't have the time. And a lot of times it's just not true. We just don't have enough data. So out of those 4,000 franchises out there, I've seen some cost a couple $1,000s, and then some, quite honestly, go up into the millions, right? So there's a heck of a range there. The other portion is that, whatever that investment amount is, like let's say a brand says they're 300,000 or 200,000, whatever it is, you don't need that whole amount in your pocket or under the mattress somewhere. We have lending institutions that will, finance 80, 90% of the deal. I borrowed money from my retirement, which a lot of folks, or some folks outside of the industry, don't know is a possibility. And the government allows you to do that with no tax implication and without paying like any early withdrawal fees, because hopefully I look younger than 65, right? So my number one criteria is really just folks that are willing to learn and willing to think about going about it a different way, right? Do you need some capital? Absolutely. Do you want a good credit score? I say, yeah, 700 range or higher is always great. But, if you're in the 600s today, it doesn't hurt to do some research, as long as you're working on that credit and can, in a couple of months, maybe be in the sweet spot. So my number one thing is don't talk yourself out of it before you at least exhaust some opportunities, right? Now, it always helps if you have a rich uncle or a rich aunt, hey. That's right. In fact, if you have one, I want to be introduced to them too.
Yeah, we need to find more of them for sure. How long do you stay engaged with your clients? So you're the kind of the first person they talk to. You introduce them to a lot of brands. They then hopefully at some point will find something they're interested in. They'll go to Discovery Day. How far into that journey are you staying engaged with them and having conversations with them and helping them with the due diligence, the paperwork, the process, finding financing? Like, where does your kind of engagement with the client end at that point?
It actually doesn't end. Throughout the process, we kind of become good friends, right? And you start to see me as a trusted advisor. So I have clients that invested in their franchise 2 or 3 years ago and still come to me and say, hey, what do you think about this? Right. Which is totally fine. I love it. really the engagement really turns up once we get introduced to the franchise company. That's when we really start to have a lot of conversation. Before that, it's kind of like a consultation here, presentations here or there. But once you get introduced to a franchise and start walking through that discovery process, I normally suggest weekly calls at least. And the purpose of those is just to help you and to help me understand the information that you're receiving and make sure that you're digesting it correctly. And then making sure that we're engaging resources at the right time. So, for example, a lot of folks, especially their first time around, when they see their first FDD, franchise disclosure document, and it's 200 or 300 pages in a PDF, some people can get a little, off put by that. So, maybe that's when I introduce you to a franchise attorney who will go through that document in a couple of hours, because they do that all day, every day, and come up with some cliff notes of what makes sense and what you need to know. Now, I'm not telling you not to read the document. I'm just saying that there's another way around it, right? So we start having weekly conversations, at least, and sometimes we'll just hop on the phone or send a quick text if there's a quick question. But I walk you right up to that process, through the discovery, through the validation. I tell my clients the only part that I cannot and will not help them with is the actual decision making, right? Like, you can't ask me if I should do it or would you do it, because we're two different people, and the franchise that works best for you is probably horrible for me, right? And vice versa. So I never push people when it gets to that point. I want to make sure that they have all of the information to make a sound business decision, which is what we want. And then at that point, I'm kind of hands off, just listening and waiting to hear what your decision is either way.
Chris, what's your typical client? I mean, what are you seeing? Or what's the average age? Male, female? Are they married, single? Like, where are they at in their life journey? Are you seeing more minorities come in and looking for opportunities in franchising? I own 3 brands, and most of the people that own the franchises look like me. They're just a lot older. You know what I mean? And so, what are you seeing there? What's your thoughts on in getting more people who aren't typically thinking, hey, I can be an entrepreneur, I can be a business owner? What's your thoughts on engaging that demographic to maybe look at franchising as an option?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head. As I go to these franchise conventions and chat with all of these Zors, most of them look like you and a little bit older. But what happens is a lot of it is just about education, right? And so I even look at myself before I got into franchising. I thought that you had to be a millionaire to even get in, and that you just needed to have like all of this free time that that you can run the business, right? So these are common misconceptions, I guess, that I'm working really hard to try and educate everyone that's interested in about. But through that education, you do start to see people enter the space, different age groups, different dynamics, folks that look like me and say, hey, well, if you did it, I can do it, which is great, right? And so you're starting to see some of that. So I encourage anyone that that's why I think no one is not a client. Everyone can get educated on this and ask some questions. Listen, it took me, from 14 to just about 34 to purchase my first franchise, right? So franchising will be around. It's not going anywhere. So it doesn't matter if you're ready today or not. At least start doing the research so that you have some data when you're ready for it.
Absolutely. Chris, what are the top 1 or 2 industries that you're the most excited about, that you kind of see a huge opportunity in franchising? And then if there's 1 or 2 brands that you're also feel like are really up and coming and a good opportunity for people, any of those come to mind?
Yeah, so industry, I have 3 that I love, maybe 4. Fitness is just, and maybe because that's where I ended up for my first investment.
Right.
But love fitness concepts. They'll be around for some time. There'll be some moving and shaking as far as who the main players are, but a bunch of opportunity there at a really affordable price point, if you will, right? So some of those concepts will come in the low 2s, and obviously can go up from there. But I love the recurring revenue portion of fitness, and
Right.
I also love that, generally speaking, all of us are trying to be a little bit healthier, and so folks are willing to pay some money to go to a gym. So specifically boutique fitness, which I love, 1,500 square feet, smaller class sizes, some specialized equipment. That's a great, Club Pilates was, an awesome brand. Even though I'm not in the network anymore, still think that they're doing great things. Hard to find territory now because they've just had so much growth. But their sister company, Stretch Lab, this is a franchise that literally helps you stretch, right? Everyone could use that. Great numbers, and I think will grow, probably up to or past what Club Pilates did. So those are some options. I'm also very bullish on the service industry. I mean, service industry was performing fantastic before COVID and did even better through COVID. People started fixing their walls and, basements if you're not in Florida, and outdoor kitchen if you are in Florida. All of those service industries have been doing really well. I think senior care is also a great opportunity. Especially in Florida, we'll be a little selfish since that's where both of us are. But you can look up the numbers of how many people are moving to this state every day. I always say you'll never run out of old people and you'll never run out of babies. So other than senior care, anything daycare or childhood education, those are all winners in my book.
Awesome.
And my last one is beauty. I don't quite understand why a lot of women, spend a lot of money on this stuff, but it's not going anywhere from eyelashes to hair to waxing, sugaring. All of that stuff has been fantastic over the last couple of years. So
Sure. Great opportunity there. Yeah.
sure.
I'm very fortunate. My wife doesn't have a lot of, things that she likes to spend money on, but hair products is probably, number 1, 2, and 3. It blows my mind as someone who's bald and could care less about hair.
That's right.
The amount she spends on hair products and going and getting your hair done and things like that.
Right. And this is a perfect example, right? You don't have to be the client to realize that there is an opportunity there. Do I want eyelashes? Probably never, right? Like I can almost say that but maybe that's a business that I'd like to run because it just makes a lot of sense, right?
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Great to hear your story. And, I imagine your clients have a lot to learn from you, going from the process of working in a franchise, buying your first one, going to multiple units and then having an exit, and now in the consultation space. So you've got a unique perspective to help a lot of people. So that's great, man. And we are excited to talk to you again, hopefully this time next year and hear what new businesses you're excited about and how your venture's going as well. And to everyone who took the time to listen to Chris and I this evening, we appreciate it and hope you join us next time on the Social Z podcast. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.